So my name is Jellum. I work for Mojo Networks, and today I'm going to talk about making the case for having a third radio on an access point. I call this section the preaching to the choir. You know all this stuff, but I kind of want to make the point, is that demands on Wi-Fi is increasing all the time. IT budgets are decreasing or staying flat. So there's a resources gap. You need to do more with less. You need to have more intelligence built into the access point. You need to have better tools. So what I'm going to show you today, I'm not going to show you, but what I'm going to talk about is trying to make the case that the third radio is an ideal way to do this. You all know, and this is what I've been hearing this morning, reliability isn't easy, right? You have to do a lot of planning, you have to do a lot of validation, you have to do a lot of testing, not just up front, but you have to do it after the fact, and you have to do it ongoing. So in operations, so there's the proactive side, the preparation side, and then there's the operations side. You have to make sure everything is running. Wi-Fi is like a living, breathing organism. You have to feed it, you have to take care of it. If you don't take care of it, it's going to fall down at some point. You need to do the validations. And ideally, what you want to do is move things from the reactive to the proactive. So once the network's up and running, once you have a problem, you want to reduce the amount of time you're spent in reactive mode. There's so much stuff to do. There's so much time, only so much time in the day. You want to have a life after hours. So what you really want to do is make your network more proactive, right? You want to be able to have the network do a lot of the stuff on its own, give you a lot of the answers by itself, to spare you the mundane tasks of trying to do a lot of the analysis. So what that really comes down to is trying to get a lot of stuff automated and integrated into the network system. I see the third radio as a natural progression. You know, when Wi-Fi first started out, you had a Wi-Fi network, and then you had overlay networks. You had a WIPS overlay, you might have a monitoring overlay. You may still have those today. Some people prefer to do a WIPS overlay to a Wi-Fi network. They don't want to integrate that, and that's fine. Mojo makes a lot of money doing that, but my contention is that's old school. The next generation took a lot of those features and put them into the access point, but it used background scanning mode. So it took an access point off channel and put it into background scanning mode. My contention is that the third radio is the natural way to go. It's a natural progression. With the third radio and the access point, a non-access third radio can give you a lot of tools in your bag and give you a lot more detail and accuracy that you can't get with background scanning. So just a little background here. What is an overlay network? Overlay network is when you put up another device, essentially an access point, because that's how Mojo started. We took monitors and turned them into access points because they're essentially the same thing. The problem with the overlay networks, you have to have duplicate everything. You have to have duplicate hardware, duplicate cabling, duplicate switches, all of that stuff. So it gets to be a very expensive solution. You don't have to have a one-to-one, but you still have to have a 20%, around 20% overlay, which is expensive. There are ways of doing it hybrid mode. You can take and turn off radios on an access point, or turn off an access point, turn it into a monitor mode. And that's great, you can do that. The challenge is, if you do that, especially if you do it in a temporary fashion. So a lot of access point vendors will take an access point, put it into a monitor mode for a special function, but you have to do configuration, you have to do some manual stuff. You still have to take that thing out of service when you do that, which means it's not doing its primary function, which is access. And then background scanning. The challenge with background scanning is that you're going off channel. Again, you're not doing the access point's primary job, which is access. So you're on channel for, say, 10 seconds. You go off channel for 100 milliseconds to scan some other channel. You come back on channel for 10 seconds. You do that over and over again, which gave us a better picture than was there, but I think it's not the best picture. And the challenge with that was, with real-time applications, a lot of times the AP won't go into background scanning mode. It will be off-channel. And we're seeing more and more real-time applications like voice and video being deployed, which means your access point isn't going off-channel. It's not doing background scans. It's deferring that, so you're not getting a great picture of what's going on. With a third radio architecture, you can have a primary channel, radio 1 being for access, radio 2 being for access, and radio 3 being for non-access, which means it can be used for multiple things. It can be used for scanning, it can be for monitoring, it can be used for testing, it can be used for other things, and we'll talk a little bit about what possibilities are. The advantage of having a third radio is it can scan channels much faster. Rather than going into a background scanning mode where you're scanning a channel every few seconds, you can scan every channel very quickly. And I'll show you some numbers here in just a minute. Because of that, because you're scanning much faster, you get a much better picture of what's going on. Instead of seeing what's going on every 5 minutes or every 15 minutes, you can see it in a matter of in seconds of seeing what's happening in that channel. Because the primary job of the access point is to be access, and having a third radio means you're not interrupting access. The other things, I contend, having a third radio, you can do a lot more with it. If you have an intelligent access point with enough power, enough memory, you can turn that third radio into a testing tool. So more about speed and reliability. So I'm going to do a FBI test. Okay, everybody watch. Pay close attention. What happened? What was it? Yeah, flash on the screen. But what was there? What was going on? How many people were in this thing? What did they have in their hands? What were they wearing? Right? FBI training, they make you look at all this stuff, right? Well, that's kind of what happens when you're going off channel. You're looking at that other channel for a fraction of a second. If you speed things up, you get a much more accurate picture of what's going on. So instead of seeing a flash of an image, now you get a full picture, full motion picture of what's going on in the environment. Real-time information, lots of data, lots of actionable data. When you get a lot of data like that, you can actually do much more with it. That's where artificial intelligence and machine learning comes in. Having tons of data makes it a very powerful tool. What that means is you can make better decisions for RRM. You can make faster and better decisions for WIPs. You can do better monitoring of what's going on in your environment. Rather than seeing everything every few minutes, you see things in fractions of a second. So some math. I'm not going to make you do the math, but here's what's going on. So standard channel, 2.4 scans its own things. 5 gigahertz channel scans its own things. So I'm just going to focus on 5 gigahertz period. 5 gigahertz to scan all the channels, and it depends on what radio domain you're in, and what you're actually trying to scan. Here I'm just using 36 channels because there's some other things going on in here. But to do a full scan of 36 channels takes about 6 minutes. That's a fair amount of time. To make a decision on that, depending on the tool you're using and the vendor, it may take 3 passes to make that decision, or it may take 10 passes to make that decision. So if it takes 10 passes to make a decision, that's almost an hour before I can make a decision to do something. With a third radio, I can scan 50 channels in 5 seconds and do 10 passes of that in 50 seconds. Much more accurate, much more detail, much better decision making. So also with the third radio, you have more testing possibilities because you now have some intelligence, you have some power, you have something you can control. So you can do, without taking the access point out of service, without going out there on site, you can do a spectrum analysis. You can take packet traces on any channel at any time. You can do other things like much faster WIPS decisions. You can do RF look-aheads. You can do just about anything you can do with a client, you could potentially do with the third radio if the right architecture is behind it. So just a little bit about what Mojo's doing. We're doing this. We're kind of leading the way with the third radio testing. We have a third radio as a client. Each third radio can test a neighboring AP, and we can do things like client testing. We can do throughput testing. We can do voice over IP testing. We can do just make sure all the associations and everything. We can do application level testing all on the third radio. And this is unique to us. I mean, we've done this, but we're not the only ones that have a third radio. There are many other vendors out there have a third radio. We firmly believe that third radio is a way to go because you can do this, because of the flexibility, because of the better accuracy and the better data. So here's an example just of our UI. Shows going through a third radio test. This is going through the complete association to the network, connecting to the WAN, connecting to the LAN, connecting to the internet, going through the DHCP, DNS, full everything. It's a real client. It's an actual client on the network. It just happens to be a third radio on the access point. On the far right, we're showing the application test. We can actually do application level testing of common applications. So what's the value of this? Well, with the third radio, sorry, back there. With the third radio, I can do pre-testing. Again, I'm trying to go from reactive to proactive. So if I have an important meeting, and my board members are in the conference room, and I want to make sure that's an awesome experience for the board members, I can text the heck out of that without ever having to go out there. I just Say, hey, neighbor and AP, test that access point. Make sure every application, make sure the throughput's high, make sure everything is good there. That's, again, taking things from the proactive to the reactive. The other thing you can do is take things from the reactive and shorten the amount of time, and I'll talk a little about that in a second. The other point I want to make here is I think the type of radio is important. Most other vendors use a 1x1 third radio, and most of them use it for just WIP scanning and RF scanning. I contend we need at least a 2x2 third radio, because most clients are either 1x1 or 2x2, and if you don't see the 2x2s, you're missing part of the picture. I would argue with my engineering team that you should have a 3x3 third radio. There's some challenges with that. There's some technical challenges, some cost challenges. A lot of AP buyers are price sensitive, so it's a trade-off. So everything is kind of a compromise in RF, if you know anything about it, RF design. So I would contend you need at least a 2x2. You have to have the right software architecture behind it. I think APIs, everything has to be API driven because you want to be able to allow people to do what they want to do with it rather than always coming from the vendor. I think you need to have a way to access it from anywhere. The beauty of the third radio is being able to, I want to turn that access point to do a test. I don't want to have to go out there to do it. I don't have to do something special. I want to be able to get to it from my couch because I got a call in the middle of the night, something's not working. And then kind of what the industry is also going to, it's got to be easy to use. We have to stop going to the CLI to do stuff, right? The access point needs to be intelligent enough to do some of the stuff so you don't have to do it, it will do it for you. And this is where a lot of the machine learning, artificial intelligence is coming. The access points are getting smarter, the backend systems are getting smarter. They should be able to figure this stuff out and give you the information that you can make the decision on, or ideally, make the decision to solve the problem. Okay, so if you don't have a 2x2 third radio, what are you missing? Well, if you don't have a background scanning or anything, what do you see? Nothing. You see the channel you're on. If you have background scanning, it is better, but you're only seeing a piece of the puzzle. You know, every 10 seconds you see another piece of the puzzle. And it takes a while to get a complete picture. If you have a 1x1 third radio, you see more of the information, but you're only seeing, again, part of the information. So what's going on here? Oh, beautiful water, right? If you have a 2x2 third radio, you're actually seeing a much bigger part of the picture, and in real time. And the ducks, yeah. So what's the downside of having a third radio? Well, there's some cost involved, right? So there's some extra cost putting a radio in the access point. I contend that's not a huge thing. Depending on the access point, depending on the stuff, that's about a 10% overhead, right? So 10%, people might be price sensitive to that, but it's much cheaper than an overlay solution. It's not as cheap as a background scanning solution, but the value you get from the third radio is better than having a background solution. The real value is in the troubleshooting cost, because if I can reduce my mean time to resolution of a problem, that is huge, especially over the life of a Wi-Fi network. So to go and troubleshoot a problem, I may have to go to travel time. So travel time, I used to travel around the world doing troubleshooting. I used to carry a sniffer, sewing machine sniffer around. And that was extremely expensive. It was a necessary evil because those were the tools that were available. Today, if you had a third radio in every AP on every network, travel would almost be eliminated. Setup of the tools, the setup of the infrastructure would be eliminated. Trying to reproduce a problem would almost be eliminated. Collecting the data. I don't know how many times I've been on a network and spent days trying to reproduce a problem to collect the information to do the analysis. All of that, not all of it goes away, but a lot of that goes away. And with the third radio, a lot of the stuff can be built into the access point, right? The access points are getting smarter. The back-end systems are getting smarter. We build sniffers into the access point now. You don't have to, with the third radio, you don't have to turn it into a sniffer mode. We build protocol analyzers. Everything you guys know out here, most of it, can be instilled into an intelligent system. And that's what we're seeing happening in the industry. That doesn't mean you don't have jobs. That means you get to spend time on more important things. Again, with the third radio, you can have a spectrum analyzer. Spectrum analyzer is just kind of a radio doing stuff. And then your training time, because you're a very expensive resource. To send you on site to troubleshoot a problem is an expensive resource. You could have a less expensive resource collecting the data for you to do the analysis, or if the system could do the analysis for you, you could have a less expensive resource to solve the problem, or the system could solve the problem. All of this translates into a better user experience, a cheaper cost for the customer, and better Wi-Fi. So just looking at the cost. So if the third radio adds 10%, I just picked a number out of the air. Actually, that's about right. Depending on the cost of the radio, the cost of the AP, 10% can be, $100, it can be $20. So with the third radio, I'm just using the low-end numbers here. If I said support costs $100 an hour, and I spent an hour to resolve a problem, so my mean time to resolve is 1 hour, that's $100 an hour I'm spending. If I can reduce that by 25%, that's my mean time to resolve is now 3/4 of an hour, I've saved $25 for a support call. You amortize that over the life of the Wi-Fi, that's a big number. Our customers are reporting 25% is about kind of the minimum. Between 25 and 50% of the time, they're reducing their support time cost, their mean time to resolution, by having a third radio. So to me, it's obvious, right? This helps in many different ways. A little bit more incremental costs at the front end, much less support costs, mean time to resolve, better tools, less travel, and all of this stuff can be built in. So for me, this is really a no-brainer. Price-sensitive customers, it might be a challenge to say, hey, I want to add 10% to your network. But if you look at the support costs on the back end of that, that's really, it's almost insignificant. And again, the third radio helps you move from a reactive environment to a more proactive environment. And as we get to more intelligent systems, we're moving more and more that way. So the more tools we put into the third radio, making things local, troubleshooting the problems local so you don't have to travel, putting the intelligence in there so we're collecting the right data at the right time, putting if the AP sees a problem, it can trigger a third radio to take a sniffer trace, to take a spectrum analyzer. All of this stuff can be built in, but you can't do this stuff very well unless you have the tools there to begin with. The third radio is a unique tool for that, and I think, in my opinion, it's necessary and worth the incremental cost. I'm way under. I talked much faster than I expected to. Thank you. Any questions?